I'm Sara Martinez-Noriega, VP of HR at Direct Agents.
And I'm Dinesh Boaz, Managing Director and Co-founder here at Direct Agents.
Thank you so much for joining us at this next session of The Next Frontier. We will be talking about building connections and a people-first culture, and a little bit about the science behind building that level of communication, camaraderie, and collaboration. So Dinesh, I'd love to start off by asking you a little bit of, why it was so important to create this safe space so early on for everyone to be able to do hybrid work.
For us as a company, collaboration has been a big part of how we've inspired and grown the teams and really inspired the work that we do for our clients. So I think, following government guidelines when it was safe to open, we took the first opportunity to have limited capacity, social distance, and get people back in the office on a volunteer basis, and really kind of get into that first step of, okay, look, there is an end to this, and we're going to take a step towards it, and we're going to wait until it's safer to really take bigger steps. We saw that months of being on Zoom and fully remote and being alone or being, with your families or being with your roommates or spouses or friends, whoever. I think just that idea of being isolated is a very difficult thing to be in that prolonged existence. And so we as a company took that first step and it's really paid off to see where we've come today from where we were, and having those early steps has helped us do that.
Awesome. And so we'll jump into our first science factoid about the eyes. So it's been shown that maintaining eye contact is actually a trigger for oxytocin. So it does release those chemical boosts of good feelings when you do maintain eye contact between 30 to 60 seconds generally. But it doesn't just have chemical impacts, it also has psychological impacts. Mostly and predominantly Western cultures, when you do maintain eye contact, you're able to feel an openness to others, to be seen as well as to see. It helps build feelings of empathy and trust. And a fun fact is that humans are actually predominantly the only primates with white sclera, so that white around our eyes. And that allows us to actually have more nonverbal contact. So if I give you some side eye or maybe roll my eyes, you know what's going on. I'd love to ask, especially when we went remote so suddenly, why was it important for us to have a camera on culture?
I think we thrive in that, having that human connection. And as you just mentioned, even sitting here and sort of being in the room and talking to you in person, I think it's different from, last March when we did our first webinar when we were fully remote and we were speaking through laptop cameras. So I think having that real insight into the emotion that's being evoked when you're presenting something or when you're talking to someone and getting that real-time feedback, I think those are so important. Obviously, like, you can make a phone call and it's never the same, or you have something more significant that you want to talk about or something more impactful. I think having that visual cue that you can really respond to in real time is so powerful. So I think we've always thought camera on culture as being a part of what we do. Obviously, there are times when there's maybe something going on at home or whatever that doesn't allow you to do that. But I think for us that idea is instilled in the way we interact with our clients and the way we interact with our teams.
Yeah, having at least that as the first step.
Right.
There's actually another study where a group of researchers wanted to see if those same effects, that release of oxytocin, those psychological effects, were found when you took that eye contact and put it into play in the virtual setting. I know for us, we even went so far as having trainings on how do you mimic, having eye contact. Unfortunately, well, yes, it can be mimicked, and those researchers found that, yes, it does still release oxytocin. You get some of those same feel-good chemical releases. Right. It's still a little bit of a performance, I think, when you're on Zoom, because while I'm trying to make you think that I'm having eye contact with you by looking at the camera, I can't look at your eyes anymore because I'm looking at a camera, and vice versa. So you get kind of like a one-sided type of thing. And I think that led to the biggest phenomenon that everyone talked about, Zoom fatigue, right? Can you tell us a little bit about your experience and how that affected that addition to the disconnect?
Yeah, I think, for the first time in our probably in our adult lives, we'd go where our commutes became between our kitchen to our bedroom, or from our bed to the desk next to the bed. And so I think having that experience of getting up, getting dressed, going out in the world, and like coming back and having that separation between where you live and where you work, I think that's so important. And we're sort of feeling that now as, you know, our office is now, you know, almost back to full capacity on certain days. I think there's a much more of a process when you're actually going out in the world and doing those things that you used to do. And for me personally, I think getting to the point of just getting past being on a laptop for 8 hours a day with very little breaks in between, and forcing yourself to have those times to be active, or to take a walk, or to have those normal things that you would do in your normal workplace days pre-pandemic, I think, as you know, for me personally, was that fatigue moment. So I think as you mentioned, having that kind of interaction with people earlier, and then having that eye contact, being in person, I think you can't replace that with Zoom. And so I think we're striving to continue to have that sort of like right mix of a hybrid workplace, so that we can balance that as we work towards the future.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think a lot of what you're talking about makes me feel like it's feeling like you're confined, right? And literally, we were confined in a Zoom box, because you literally see this much.
Yep.
So you don't see my hands, you don't see if I'm typing, you don't see if I'm like, I don't know, doing my nails, something random, I don't know. It's just a feeling, again, of like disconnect, right? What's going on? And there's another study in the 60s that showed that 70 to 93% of all communication is actually nonverbal. So when you break down communication, only 7% is actually the words that you're saying, the verbal. 38% is tone. And 55% is visual. So that's a huge amount to be visual. I think we've probably all experienced a time where we sent a text or an email that we meant one way and someone heard it in a different way when they read it. It's not easy.
And I'll add like one more point, which you mentioned, is that having that, you know, that performance, right? Like we've never, as professionals, and even, you know, when we're studying in college and school and we're training to learn something, I think the idea of performing on camera for 8 to 10 hours a day is something that we've never experienced or been trained for, or you know, have that like endurance for. So I think we were thrown into this to grow our businesses and to continue thriving in what we do. And I think we all, you know, in our industry and in so many others, we rose to the challenge. We did that. But I think that's part of that fatigue, is that having that always on performance, where you're looking at someone or a group of people in the eyes in that little box, in that little screen. And all the things that you mentioned. So those like visual cues, and those like, when is the turn for someone to talk, or what's that person thinking as you say something. Those are all things that are very sort of lost in those kind of calls. So I think, you know, as we strive towards that next phase, those are all things that we're thinking about in the sort of modern workplace.
Yeah, just having that ability to flow.
Right.
Absolutely. And then the last, you know, scientific factoid I'll throw out there is just this little bit of the science behind shared experiences. So in the 90s to early 2000s, there was an experiment to show how social support affects the ability to have a different perception on things. What they did was have a group of different participants stand literally at the base of a hill to see how steep they thought this hill was. Some people got to stand next to a friend, some people had to stand alone, and some people had to imagine a friend or imagine someone that they didn't like. And what was really neat to see is that the people that were actually standing next to a friend or even thinking about a friend perceived that hill to be much less steep than the others, especially those who were standing by themselves. And to me, this makes me think of, you know, how alone people felt and how much more challenging and daunting tasks seemed when they felt like they were the only ones doing it, right? I think we heard a lot of people saying, I feel like, you know, only 10 people are doing X amount of work and everyone else is slacking, but we heard that from everybody. So obviously there is something wrong. So can you share a little bit about some of the ways that direct agents went about reintroducing and fostering that social support network?
Yeah, and I'll just take it a step back for a second. I think one thing that you bring up as a great point is that now that we're, you know, open and with the hybrid work model, I think the idea of those like moments that happen in person, that random moments where you're like walking through and you've got an idea, or you're stressed out about something and you can say, hey, like, what do you think about this in real time, without like, hey, let's do a Zoom call, let's schedule a meeting, let's, get the cameras on. I think having that like momentary connection with the group of people that you walk by in a physical space opens up so many ideas so much faster. So I think, yes, we all celebrated the speed of Zoom and like how we can make decisions faster and we can move faster. And I think it's helped us communicate externally in many ways, where we can connect with the client in moments notice about a challenge, rather than traveling to them and seeing them, or making a phone call that seems a little bit more distant when we're talking to an outside party outside of our company. I think having those accidents that happen in an office where you run into someone and you're like, hey, are you following up on that thing? And like, I've got a great idea for that. And those things happen much more often when you are in the physical space with your teams. So I think we've been really excited about how that's developing and growing. And as you mentioned, like standing up on that hill and not, being scared to fall down when you're surrounded by people. I think we all are starting to feel that again by being surrounded with our colleagues. When those bigger challenges come, we can look around the room and say, what do you think? And get that feedback and feel that energy, which may have been daunting and being isolated alone, in the times that we couldn't do that.
Absolutely. It was almost like you were scared to like bother someone because you couldn't see them. You weren't sure, like, right. Well, I have this quick question, but I don't want to disrupt someone's day right. over it. And now it's really nice. We just had an in-person meeting with our senior leadership team, and the energy, the fact that people were just ebbing and flowing, the laughter, I think the like spontaneous right. laughter that we were able right. to get, that was a little bit hard and almost contrived right. in that Zoom setting was really nice.
There were a lot of bad jokes, but people still laughed. And so I think that's the important part, right? The laughter is so much energy from that. So it's great.
So last summer, I think there were quite a few different initiatives that got started yep. To kind of try and help people recreate these moments of spontaneity, especially when we had, this great weather. Yeah. Can you tell us a little bit about some of those things that we did?
Yeah, I mean, last summer, I think it was very early stage. So, we had limited capacity in the office. It was pre-vaccines. We're all wearing masks, so we were testing weekly. So we had a very active testing protocol. Yeah. And so I think, we opened, and then we thought, what can we do safely? So we did a lot of small team events outside, as one, to get people together, two, to support local businesses in New York City that, when the pandemic hit and when things started opening, I think, some of the restaurants and bars and any of those businesses took a real beating. So I think we thought, what can we do in terms of getting involved on some level? So I think we started doing small outdoor gatherings across the company where people felt safe to, even if they weren't coming in the office, maybe they met us outside. So we started doing those maybe monthly. And then I think we transitioned into more like slightly larger ones as things got safer and there were more social mixers cross team. We also introduced a whole team of Next Gen. So we call it directly as Next Gen. So it's a group of people that are newer to the company, but they are excited about the culture. They want to grow it. They want to own it. And so we've given them more autonomy to build little events that way they can put together. And so we started doing that, and we've grown that. And now we've got several Next Gen teams. First, it was a hybrid sort of virtual with like different things like wine tastings, et cetera, that other people were doing. And now we've really transitioned that into those Next Gen leaders as people are now vaccinated and gathering again. We have a very active culture that we managed to maintain during the pandemic, thanks to some of these things that we put into place last year. So as we're transitioning back into that hybrid workforce model, as many companies are in the fall, we've already got a runway of things that are happening that are helping, helping getting people back and getting people to feel comfortable and getting us out of that routine that we've been in, where we were, in this like go from our bed to our desk and feel isolated and think that was okay. I think we've all broken out of that now and feeling that level of comfort with being around people again.
Yeah, absolutely. I applaud the investment that you and Josh both, put forth to be able to, give us this runway. I think a lot of companies right now are still not sure how they're going to reopen, and they're barely starting that planning now.
Yeah.
And we've been doing this. We've been doing
Yeah.
it and redoing it and
Yeah.
redoing it. And I'm excited.
Yeah.
I'm excited to see, what comes in, not just the fall, what comes in the summer, what comes next month.
Absolutely.
So thank you so much all for joining us. Stick around. The next session of Next Frontier will be starting just a few on culture and relevance.